Good afternoon. Okay. Well, I'm really excited to be here, and I wanted to start by saying that being from Chicago and being here in Toronto and seeing everyone who's working together to really try to figure out where new media fits, Toronto's doing something unique, and Chicago needs to learn a lot, and we need to catch up with you. So I'm going to have to go back and have those conversations. So bios always start by talking about the individual. But in reality, I'm just a fortunate one who gets to sit up here and talk about the work. But the work that we do is a ton of people sitting back in Chicago. And it consists of mentors. We have over 20 media artists who work with us, teachers, programmers, designers, researchers, all working together to really try to understand this particular question. If we believe that what it means to be literate in a society is connected to the technological innovations of its time, well, what's happening where we are today? I mean, if you think about it, if you go back to the advent of the printing press, that made it important to be able to read, right, when the printing press developed. But we're now witnessing a transformation, a paradigm shift. If you think about the life of a college sophomore or senior, when they were born, before all of these things were invented. For me, when I was a kid, yes, we had Atari, it came out, but it didn't fundamentally change the ways in which I communicated with people. If I wanted to communicate with my grandmother, I had to pick up the phone or write a letter. But today, my 2-year-old nephew, if he talks to my mother, he's using it on an iPad and FaceTime. So fundamentally, what it means to communicate is changing. So we have to ask the question, what is the best medium to do all these different things? Oop, let's go back one. Simple things is learn to sew. We taught a sewing class on the south side of Chicago, and the person teaching it didn't know how to sew. So they used videos online to teach stitching, right? All kinds of different things. And of course, we know to read a book is changing. So if this is changing for me, and I'm over 40, what does it mean for a third grader? Each of those questions is going to be fundamentally different in their lifetime. And so in our work, we've decided that to be literate for a third grader, a kindergartner, someone who's now born, and even a high school student, for them to be literate means they have to be more than textually and computationally literate. They have to be literate in all modes of communication, which today are graphical, musical, cinematic, and interactive, in addition to the traditional forms. Now the challenge comes, and particularly this has been a problem in the States, and might not be as much of a problem here, is that we haven't necessarily succeeded in ensuring that everyone is literate. Right? We oftentimes have problems in ensuring that all races, ethnicities, and socioeconomic status are literate. So our group has taken on the challenge of saying, we're going to try to figure out how to ensure that all kids become literate. And so I want to start by giving you a snapshot of a kid who we think exemplifies that. And Jalen is one of, he would probably laugh at this picture now because he's now 15 and has a deep voice now, and he's much taller. So this is him at 12. Jalen was selected by Edutopia as one of 11 kids who, across the United States, who exemplified what they thought, what it meant to be a digitally literate kid. And so for Jalen, everything when he was 12 was around Naruto. Anything and everything. And so he learned to use Comic Life to make comic books. He learned anime music videos, so of course he was downloading videos he shouldn't, but he was creating anime music videos. He was creating his own versions of tennis shoes using the characters, but that's on the graphic end. He also was using Robotics US First and creating robotics competitions. I know there's a Scratch workshop. He created his own version of Tetris using Scratch. And he, of course, he's Southside Chicago, so he was, of course, doing digital music and hip hop. So all of these things he was doing on a regular daily basis. And this is a video clip of him, sort of, where you can actually see him in his environment.
I was, I think, 3 years old when I first went on the computer. I was 5 when I got my Game Boy. I used to play that like every day. It was just so fun. And so I equally used my Game Boy and my computer. So I like had an hour to play each. So that I would do basketball during the time that I wasn't doing technology. And then during the time that I wasn't doing anything, I just lay down and chill. Zoe! Zoe! At 7 years old, that's when I really started drawing a lot. I like it, it's fun, and after people compliment on my drawings, so I think that's kind of fun. And then at 10 years old, when I went to 5th grade, I made my first comic book. And after that, I went into 6th grade, and that's when I got my laptop, and then I started using that more often. I joined the DYN program.
If you know your account, pull it up on your laptop. The Digital Youth Network was really trying to look to see how now the students are really inundated with all this new technology. How does that impact how kids socialize, and then how does that in turn really impact how they learn as well?
There's a project called Editing Project 1. Everybody got it?
The kid can come in and they can do digital music production, graphic design and animation, game design, or digital video production.
Why did they go in slow motion? Why would they go in slow motion though?
Kids on their own are jumping across from all these different mediums, so we really need to kind of explore all of them as well and try to support kids to become better producers and consumers and critiquers within all these different pieces. So Remix World is kind of like MySpace, kind of like Facebook, mixed with a little bit of YouTube as well. So you can go on there, you can post your own videos that y'all make, you can post the music that you're making. I saw you are remixing the song online already. Remix World is a contained social networking site that's only open to our students and our mentors. So the rest of the kids in the school can actually see what you guys are doing. You can also go in and you can comment and critique on what everybody else has done. So the idea is that students for us are already spending all of their time on all these different social networking communities around the web. Why can't we reappropriate those kind of tools? And then there's more formal educational context.
I post up videos, poems, and just whatever I thought was like, that my opinion was, it was cool. I would post up on the Remix World to see what other people thought. Sometimes on YouTube I get worse feedback on the Remix World. Well, I'm okay with that though, because I know there's a lot of people on YouTube are better than me at what I do, because they've been doing it longer and they know how to do it better. I accept that, and after I try harder to make mine just as good as theirs. That's one of the shoes that I've created. First, I just took a layout of a normal Nike Dunk. It was just plain white, and after I add in colors and different images. When I created this shoe, I was thinking of Halloween, so I put in some 3D pumpkins almost all across the front of the shoe.
Have your seat, do your thing. I will sit back and get out of your way. You know, Jalen has always been creative, always. And he did that. And his mind kind of thinks a little different. It's very open. And to see him fall into something that can connect with where his mind goes sometimes, and to be able to have him do something tangible, it's amazing to see that.
Division 201.
Let's stop it there, and you can find the rest. It's an 8-minute video, so I will run over time. But that was just an example of what we discovered over the period of time of doing this work. Is you create a Jalen because you figure out, and this is where I think when I look here in Toronto, you figure out that every place where a child is, you have to provide access and opportunities for them to develop their literacies and use their digital literacies. So it's not just the responsibility of the home, the school, the after-school place. You have to allow the work to move on all those different places. So, and also understand that each kid is going to follow a different path. And so our model is that we use the school to create media arts classes. And that's where we developed a base set of literacy that we expect everyone to use. So teachers, if you want to use iMovie, you can assume that every kid can do an iMovie. You're not having to stop and do 2 weeks of iMovie instruction in class. After school is more passion driven. If you want to learn how to do anime music videos, you can take an anime music video class. At home, it's more self-paced, using online social network tools where you can dive in and sort of learn by yourself. And then the community is really important for creating spaces where you can sort of showcase your work for others can see, which motivates you to do this work. If you haven't read the book, or the book by Mimi Ito, Hanging Out, Messing Around, and Geeking Out, which is, I think, the largest ethnography of digital natives, digital kids that exists, really talks about kids need opportunities to both hang out around technology and see what others are doing, ways to sort of get their feet wet and try it out. But then they need the skills and the resources and the people and the places to be able to geek out and learn how to get better. So the work, when we worked with Jalen, we were working in a school context where we were able to control what was taking place in the school and what was taking place in the after school, and we saw kids, every day, and we also connected with them online. We were challenged then to think about, well, what would this look like in a library space, where in libraries kids can come in and go out whenever they want to. So how do you do some of the same type of work? We first knew that technology alone wasn't the solution, so it wasn't just taking away the books and putting in the computers. We had to really rethink the layout of space. And so this is just a visual of 5,000 square foot library space that we have, and there's going to be, I think, over 30 of these across the United States in the next year, where there's a space of hangout where kids can showcase their work. Over here is where they can mess around and see what each other is doing. And down here they can take extensive workshops where they can learn something. And at one point in time, you have kids in the hangout space playing games, while kids down in the geeking out space are learning something technical. Very loud, but it works. And these are snapshots of actual real pictures of what so books are still read. This is an interesting point. The library, the book circulation, you can see some books here, has gone up over 300%. Youth book circulation has gone up. They're not reading in the space, but they're checking out books. You see they're playing games, they're collaborating with music, they're comfortable. So one of the things that we learned the most that's important is creating spaces and places where students can be, and that they can have time and access to technologies and to each other, and to see, oh, you're doing that, well, maybe I might want to do that. So just being able to look over and see the young man playing on the keyboard, someone else can watch that and say, hey, let me come over and try to do that. But in addition, it's not just about space. It's also about mentors. All the media artists in the house. It's about in your jams that you've had, which you're going to show later. It's about getting experts in working closely with students, but also artifact-based curriculum. So students are building something, and they're putting in the effort around creating an artifact that can be used and shared. Technology access, of course. And then one of the things we really believe is important is making sure that what you do in one space has value and currency in another space. So I can take what I've done in after school, take it into school, or I can take what I've done in school and I can take it into the after school. If what you do is only stays in one place, then it might not be that relevant for you to learn and learn how to do it. So just a peek at the social network, this is the glue for us. It's a social network where students are putting up all their work. It's getting assessed. It earns virtual currency that they can turn in for products. So if you created 10 high-quality videos, you might be able to get a camera. But it has to be high quality, and the work is reviewed by artists who are physically close to the students, but also artists who are just connecting with them virtually. Access to self-paced learning, but also the most important thing for them is a ranking system. So they sort of know who's the best in a particular thing, and so they can go look at that person's work. Hey, I want to get great in anime music videos, so let me go look at Jalen's work and see how Jalen got there. Let me look at all the products that he's done, and even the courses that he's taken. I wanted to show you an example in a kid's own words. This is looking at a kid from 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, how he talked about himself, his own sense of identity, and how it developed. This happens to be a young man who had, in the States we call it an IEP. He's much more a visual learner than he was a traditional learner. So in the 6th grade, when he first started working with us, he always had a fascination with games, and he called himself a game head. But he was already very clear there about he wanted to spend his time when he was in after school playing video games and looking at them, but still he views himself as a game head. In the 7th grade, you could see some of the work products that he had done on the side. He had done robotics and also done some comic life books. He begins to realize that it's not just about playing someone else's work, it's also about creating his own. And so he begins to make a transition to spending more time creating. And then at the end of the 8th grade, when we went back and interviewed him, now he's about to go to high school, and he's saying, well, okay, well, it's more than just becoming a video game maker, and I don't mean just like you need to necessarily do more than that, but he begins to see that these same skill sets are developing him for careers in life. And so we think that the development of digital literacies, in addition to maybe making the next generation of filmmakers and game makers, is also preparing kids with the skill set that is needed to be engineers, lawyers, doctors, and everything else. And it's important for them to understand the nexus and the connection between that. I want to show you some example of some data, because we're really proud about this data, because we, of course, were working with kids in the south side of Chicago, all African American, and we were partnering with colleagues in California, Stanford, who were comparing our kids to a group of kids in Silicon Valley. And the question was, could we create that environment that linked homeschool and after school, where our students, if you looked at the work created by our students and looked at a comparable group in Silicon Valley, more from age, not from any other factor, could you see a difference? And what we saw, if you looked at their ability to do these 16 things, had you ever done them once, or had you done them more than 3 to 6 times? And these are artifacts or examples of things that we think will classify you as being digitally literate. We saw that at the beginning of our 6th grade year, let me go back and say this, at the beginning of the 6th grade year, 96% of the students on the south side, as one would expect, of Chicago have fewer experiences than the kids in Silicon Valley. At the end of the 8th grade year, 86% of the kids in Chicago had more experiences than the kids in Silicon Valley. And they had more breadth of experience, and they had also had more depth of experience. So of the 16 things the kids in Chicago had done, an average of almost 11 of them, 12 of them, at least once. But they had done at least 4 things, at least more than 6 times, right? So they had had experiences, but they had actually gone deeper. And the slide I actually really want to talk a moment about and leave with, and because this is the most important thing and I think connects to what it is that you're doing here in Toronto, is when we interviewed the kids and the parents in both Chicago and in Silicon Valley, and we talked around, because we wanted to say, well, how did we make this, how did this happen? What's the perception of what's going on? If we talked and interviewed parents, and if you looked at these 7 roles and you asked parents, how many did you play? And from the kids in Chicago and the kids in Silicon Valley. In Silicon Valley, if you have a 2-parent household, there's 14 roles that can be played. On average, 10 of those roles were played. So, you know, the mom and dad were combining to play at least 10 of these. In Chicago, it was only 5. And when we talked to the parents, and particularly the parents in Chicago, they said, I had no idea. I thought my role was to provide my kid a laptop, but that because I'm not really technically literate and sophisticated, I don't necessarily think of myself as being the employer of my kids' technical skills, or being the collaborator, or being a resource provider. Right? I'm a resource provider in the technology, but not necessarily in other ways. But when you talk to the kids, the difference is in Chicago, they felt that the after-school environment, the mentors made up for those roles, whereas you didn't have that in Silicon Valley, the schools didn't play those roles. And so the important piece, and I think this is what you're doing here, what we've done in Chicago now is we're explicit with our parents about this. You might not be the teacher, because you might not have the technical sophistication to do that, but you can always be a learning broker, and you can figure out, bring your kids to the DigiSpace downstairs. How are you actually having your kids teach you? How are you being a cheerleader? And if you begin to play these roles, what we begin to see is that more and more of the kids, regardless of the socioeconomic background and status, can develop those sets of literacies such that between Chicago, any type of place, Chicago and Silicon Valley, you don't necessarily need to see the difference. So I want to close also with I don't expect you to be able to make sense of this, but what this is we call it a technobiography, and where it's looking at kids' life, and this is even over a year and a half. And what we see is that up on top, all those lines, those are all the programs that this one individual is involved in, all the different ways in which she's engaging in, like a photography class, a video class, and ways in which she's learning how to do technology. And what it results in, all the little dots on the bottom are all the digital artifacts that she uploaded in the social network. And you see that as she's learning, she's producing, and she's accumulating a whole record. And this snapshot and this collection, she went from the junior year to the end of her senior year, developing the skill sets that then enabled her to enter DePaul University in the College of Digital Media and be prepared and able to step into the program and be successful. So I want to thank you. Mm-hmm.
Welcome to Toronto, and wow, where to begin with that amazing success story. That's so profoundly exciting. And you've done this fantastic job through the libraries and in your South Chicago community. And I'm really curious to see what sort of a role model you've been taking this beyond the borders of South Chicago. Are we seeing the excitement in libraries beyond your borders in the educational world?
Yes, our funding, we've been funded, fortunate to be funded by the MacArthur Foundation, and the MacArthur Foundation always in the beginning wanted to first see if through funding they can have examples that they would then push and expand. And so the work with UMedia, now there was a national competition with the funded by MacArthur and IMLS, which is the Museum, Library, and Sciences organization, for 20 U-Medias to, and I won't call them U-Medias, learning labs to open up, because each one needs to take on the culture of the community, and they all shouldn't be and won't be cookie cutters of the one that we've done in Chicago. Mm-hmm. But you'll see 20 of them over the next year open up, and there's already 4 that are opened up, one at the Smithsonian, one in New York, and one in Pittsburgh that's opening up. So it's really gratifying to see the work, and really, as I said earlier, it's really the work of so many people, where people is creating a nugget where people can then say, okay, let me figure out what this looks like for us.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say the greatest challenge is that you see in rolling this out into the community? As somebody who works in schools, and I've been in schools for 12 years, my sense is it's been a bit of a struggle, and it's not a uniform application, and it's exciting to see as a new generation of educators move into the classroom, they're adopting a lot of these technologies just because it's part of who they are. They've grown up with them. Where would you see the hurdles?
I think one of the biggest hurdles is the expectation that teachers are going to do it by themselves. Mm-hmm. And that, I mean, at least say in the States, as media has come in, also the increased importance of test scores. And so you're a science teacher who has to say, well, I need to pass a test, get my kids to pass a test, but also need to bring in the new media. So is being creative about the partnerships and bringing in artists, media artists, to come in and collaborate with teachers and in schools. And for us, every schools used to have music, and we said, well, can't we create a digital class where you can bring in artists of all different types of abilities and to collaborate? So I think that's one of the most important spaces. And then the issues, and then the other one is coming up and I'll use the analogy of basketball. Kids put in time and effort to do things that they believe has value and others see. So where are the performance spaces for kids' work to be seen? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to make a video if I think someone else is going to see it. Mm-hmm. If you don't create an opportunity for someone to see their work, then over time they're not going to do it. And then creating a video is going to be the same thing as doing a 5-paragraph essay. Right. So figuring out the spaces where it can be seen.
Right, right. So do we have to redefine play in a school environment? That you use the word play an awful lot, and for so many children, a lot of what you shared today would be defined as play. And yet there are so many, obviously, tremendous learning opportunities through play and through exposure to making videos and playing games. And how do we get teachers to include these technologies
so one of the things,
create those play centers, I guess?
So I think it's the work with, particularly in the school space, we did our after-school program in the school, but it was an after-school program, of course, which had different constraints than in the school day. So in the school day, every kid had to learn to make a video if that was the media arts class. There's an expectation the same way they had to learn other things, that they had to learn those things. So I wouldn't say it was play as much because they didn't have a choice to do that, but they had the choice in the after-school space. And then the other thing we did, again, was work with each subject area to create an exhibit project. So in history, it was a living history fair where kids created videos. In science, it was the science fair. In literacy, it was also the oratory opportunity, where there was a way in which every teacher could partner with the digital skills to be able to create a project where it was important that kids were learning the digital, because it was going to make the teacher actually look good in terms of how their kids performed. Right. And that little trick, if you will, created an engagement on teachers to say, I really want this in my classroom, because at that point they were being held accountable to bring the digital into their classrooms.
Right, right. Is your sense we're providing educators with the skill set, the professional development to keep up with children?
No. No, we're not. And again, I'm speaking from understanding more so the states where it's not even a requirement that teachers or even that students are developing digital literacies. It hasn't really made it into the required skill set. Mm-hmm. And so I think you have teachers, and at least the data will show you in the states, that those who become teachers, even though they're more technically sophisticated than teachers of the past, are still most likely to have the least technical ability than of others coming out of college. So again, I think if we can't expect the traditional role of teacher to be the one who brings all of this in. So we have to figure out ways in which, as kids are developing these skill sets in other places, which makes sense. I mean, kids are after school and doing all kinds of other things, that we're able to bring in what they do in other ways. So a teacher should be able to, let's say with a badge system, know, hey, these are the 10 kids in my class who can make a movie, so you know what, you might be able to do your project as a movie. Because I'm not going to teach you how to do it, but if you know how to do it, I will allow this as a deliverable. So if we have a way of allowing teachers to know what kids can do, then I think it's easier for them to integrate it. And I'll say this, is that we've seen that the more in our work, because we're developing the base set of literacies for kids, it's our more experienced teachers who do a better job of integrating the digital because they don't have to teach it. Right. When a teacher has to teach it, it's the younger teachers who are the first to try it out, but oftentimes they have the most difficulty because they're still trying to learn their subject matter. So if you work with an experienced teacher and you make them feel assured that kids have the technical skills, you'll be amazed at the types of products that they'll do with integrating in the content and integrating it with the technical.
Right. So it sounds like new curriculum might be a little bit of role reversal, where we have children and students educating the educators. So at a grassroots level then, we know that children have Nintendo as a starting point. When do we start this exercise? When do we start creating and rolling out these new media literacies? We're doing a good job. Toronto is very advanced and Ontario when it comes to media literacy. But we're still struggling in this market, certainly for those new media literacies. So how do we establish some grassroots opportunities, and at what age?
So I have, over the last 8 months, I've been raising my 6-year-old twin nieces. And the iPad has been the best friend that we've had in our household. As a consumption device, enabling them to consume so for instance, they needed to understand seasons, and I was trying to explain, and it wasn't working. So I found an iPad app that explained 4 seasons. They used it once, twice, they got it, they understand seasons. There's all kinds of tools also for them to be creative and things. So I think you start as young as 2 and 3. It's just, to them, the technology is like a pencil was to us. Right. And they need to have experience and exposure, and you control it the same way you control access to other things. But I think you start with them as young as possible. And there's all kinds of tools. I believe you're going to see an example of, or at least one of the talks today is going to talk about one where, with the finger and things like this, kids can be as creative. So I think you bring it as young down as possible, but you control it. And what we've been able to do is, so we have books online that they're reading, but they have paper books that they're reading. Right. They're looking at videos, they're talking. It's all, if you do it all in control, then it works all together.
And so a recommended curriculum then, if we're looking at the educational environment, for a classroom, say a grade 1 classroom, how do you roll out a 5-day schedule using new media literacies? Can you?
Well, I think with tools such as, Scratch can be used with a young grade. And again, there's a Scratch workshop here. That's definitely something, a tool that you can use. I think even having kids record their stories to books that they're reading is another one, and having them listen and play back, and even working with their parents to say, hey, here's your kid's favorite story, record it and have them listen to it, and you'll be surprised how often a kid connects to the words. So I think definitely things with visual and having them color and things like that, I think is tremendous. And Scratch begins to introduce a level of interactive design. You saw the robotics. I think there's things outside of the computer. There's the Legos, the robotics. I don't know if you would do that as a kindergartner with actually making it interactive, but definitely when you're talking about 1st and 2nd grade, you can do those types of things. So I think we're also now moving to a stage where it's beyond just the computer, and it's much more in the interactives that sit and live on the floor and around you. So by tomorrow, there's going to be something different. So it's just being very conscious of and being very open to learning new things and listening to your kids as they bring things into you.
And how do you get over that that fear, that hurdle that so many teachers seem to have? Is your recommendation that we have resource centers then within the schools that offer these new media literacies, or what's the best way?
Schools, libraries. You're in thinking in your community, there might already be centers where kids are learning this, and develop those partnerships. And really, is understanding what your kids can do. So coming up with a set of projects or things where you know who's able to do what in your school. And then also, if you have enough kids who know how to do something, they're going to teach each other.
Right.
And again, if you allow kids to showcase what they can do, you're going to have a lot of kids who are going to learn it on their own. Because if Johnny can do it, then I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just provide me access to resources, then I will do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's I think we don't use that enough. We don't allow kids to teach each other or give kids the resources enough to learn it, and also then to show us that they can do it. I think you'll be surprised what your kids can already do, but they probably don't feel like a school or it's worth bringing into the school, because it's not going to necessarily be respected as a form of literacy that's valued. So if you show that we value that form of literacy, you'll be surprised. And actually, the biggest surprise we learned, and I shouldn't even say surprise, but schools have been traditionally focused on textual and computational literacy. So kids who are skilled in that way have done well, and many kids who are visual haven't. And so those might be the kids you have challenges with. Mm-hmm. And we've experienced that those are the kids who do the best in this work. And so on our robotics team, I can go into a 5th grade class. Our robotics team is in the 6th grade. I can go into a 5th grade classroom and have done this. And the kids who are fidgeting, the boys who are fidgeting are going to be the boys who are going to do well in the robotics. Right. It's visual literacy. They don't have to read anything, but they can look at those 30 pages of visual instructions of how to put a robot together and get it done instantly. Mm-hmm. And the kid who's a straight A kid, who's more traditional in reading and writing, they look at those visual directions and are lost. So I think one of the most important things that digital literacies and new media literacies has done is sort of even the playing field, and has enabled all forms of expression to come into the classroom. And if we begin put ourselves in the experience of understanding that we're educating kids today for the world that they're going to enter, not now, and if we think about that, how we communicate is really based on how cheap it is to communicate with something, and that visual images, images are going to be, and visual images are going to be much more of a way of communicating, that it's imperative that we develop and respect and nurture those types of communication skills, because if not, we're going to end up with a group of kids who can consume but they can't produce, and that means they won't be able to tell their stories. So I think that's the hardest thing for us to do, is to remember that we might have been trained in one period, but that we're training kids for a different era, and we have to constantly be thinking about what that era is.
Right. And I guess I'm interested in the digital citizenship piece, and it sounds like such an enormously sensible approach, which is if you talk to them and you empower them with all of these wonderful technologies, that they're going to make good choices. And yet, no, okay. But I guess that's the piece that obviously scares off a lot of educators, and it's a lot of them have great concerns about children's ability and maturity in managing, especially the social types of media. Yeah,
so what we do is, so when we talked about Remix World, and the important things we said in there is a closed, private social network. So it's open to a school space, and schools can decide how open they want it. And so kids have to learn, and they have to have experienced failure. But you want that failure to be in a small space where adults who care about them and their friends can see that and help them develop before just, at some point they're going to get on Facebook. You can't completely keep them away from it. Right. And so you don't want to be their first time that they've ever thought about their identity, digital identity, to be the first time that they upload a picture on Facebook. So I think you need to create safe spaces, and we need to be open to those and developing those experiences in the school days, such that they understand it and they learn, and they get instant feedback about what's working and not working, such that when they go out into the Facebook spaces, they're much more controlled. So we experience, and one of the beauties of having kids create things is we say to them, we never tell kids no. What we tell them is, whatever you create, if we can bring your mother and your grandmother in here and you can defend it, then put it up.
Right.
But at some point, you're going to have to defend it to them. And that right there
Beautiful.
Determines what it is that they put up. And also, kids are harsher on each other when they know each other in a close space than they are. They'll tell someone to take it down also.
So they're self-policing. Interesting. So if we're looking at the parent side of the partnership that you shared, the social aspect of so many of these fantastic tools is obviously what often concerns parents. Any recommendations on destinations that we want to send our children so that they are dipping their toe in that social space? Any communities, your point of view on forums?
Well, I mean, more schools are exploring their own social network spaces. I think one of a good tool, and it's a collaboration we have, is with Common Sense Media, which is a place where you can go in and for videos, and actually now for games, they just have introduced a gaming where they'll tell you what grade level appropriate it is. And actually, I think they're pretty decent with not saying, okay, because it has a little violence, no one should ever look at it. So I think it's a good place to have a conversation with your kids around and to select media. And we've worked in places where all kids have their laptops, and we just say with parents of the same way if you wouldn't let your kid to have a TV in their room, then don't allow them to take the laptop into the room. Mm-hmm. And constantly have a check-in moment where at any point in time I can open up your laptop and see what's on. I have access to your Facebook account if that's there, so that there's no level of privacy. And so and the interesting thing is when we go to work, right? It's not like our employers aren't looking at what we're doing. So it's also a sense of literacy that you're teaching your kids, mm-hmm. that you're leaving a digital footprint, and mm-hmm. anyone can access it. Not anyone, but it can be accessed. So Common Sense Media is a great tool that we look at. I'm hoping that more and more, so like you take the TIFF work, it would be great if I could, after leaving TIFF Kids, find a link where here's all the TIFF approved games and animations, and you'll make it easier for me as a parent to go to those. So more things that are curated. I think the mm-hmm. notion of curation mm-hmm. and having trusted curation is going to be critical, because mm-hmm. even myself, who spends a lot of time looking at technology and trying to keep up for what I need to put on the iPad for my 6-year-old nieces takes a lot of time. So I would love to have curated lists that I respect.
Right. And Common Sense, of course, is doing mm-hmm. some of that.
Common Sense and Joan Gans Cooney. Yeah. And would love to see a shout out to TIFF.kids to put your stuff, have a TIFF channel somewhere.
Excellent. Nick, I'm not sure if we have a chance to take a couple of questions from the audience. Is that? We're pretty close? Okay. Thanks. Any final words for the parents and the educators and the content creators in the audience?
Well, it's just really about the partnerships and taking advantage of things like the Nexus conference, and it seems like you have more and more jams and opportunities around the city to come together and collaborate and create and bring the youth voice in. I'm sure we're going to hear some of that today. Mm-hmm. I mean, those opportunities to all be in one space opens up new possibilities that you can never think of on your own sitting in your particular space. So again, kudos to Toronto for the work that you're doing, and in Chicago we're going to try to catch up with y'all.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you. It's an amazing success story, and we're so pleased to have you. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks.